In the previous video, we introduced how to define a function. There is a special Python statement called return. Throughout the course of my teaching experience, I found that many students have had difficulties in grasping the concept of return. For example, they ask questions like, why do we use return? Or why can't we use print instead? Let's use the function we wrote in the last video to give an example. Let's comment out return number of trucks with a sharp. Before we move on, I want to take a pause to explain the concept of comment out. Adding a sharp before a line of code tells Python not to run the code. The purpose of these statements within the code are to aid in self-understanding. So, adding sharp before a line of code is called commenting out the code. In the next step, we add print number of trucks below and run the code that defines the function, and then run another code that calls the function. Here, we will see an output. If our purpose in running the code is to have a look at the result, this method is fine. However, in most cases, we call functions to do further calculations. Let's say, for example, there are two towns struck at the same time. One town has 200 people and needs food for 5 days, while the other town has 400 people and needs food for 10 days. If we use the print statement, we will need to manually calculate how many trucks are needed to deliver the food. To expand on this, let's try an example. We add number of trucks for village A in the code where the function is first called. What we are doing here is assigning the result of calling the function to the variable that we just added in. Now let's run it. The result is 2. But if we add a new line here and rerun the variable alone, nothing shows up in the output. Similarly, let's assign the result of the second call to a variable called number of trucks for village B. When we run this code, the result is 8. However, if we rerun the variable alone, nothing shows up in the output either. And if we add these two variables together, we will get an error that says none type cannot be added together. Let's go back to the function and replace the print statement with a return statement. Let's run the code that defines the function and then run the code that assigns the value. Nothing shows up in the output this time either. Now, let's rerun the variable alone. The result is 2. So what does this suggest? This actually shows that if we use the return statement, we can get the value of number of trucks as the output of the function. The result that returns in the output can be passed to a variable. This is called an assignment. But if we were to use the print statement, the value is only printed on the screen as we saw before. This is because when we run the code, we call the function and run every line of the code in the function. When it gets to the print statement, it prints out the value of number of trucks. However, nothing is returned as an output from the function, meaning it's not an assignment to the new variable. Therefore, the new variable is currently null. Now let's try to run this part of the code. Nothing shows up in the output, so we have to run another code to assign the value to the variable. The result is 8. And last but not least, let's run the code that adds the variables. The result gives us 10. As we mentioned before, if we use the return statement instead of the print statement, we will be able to use the result from calling the function to do further calculations.